Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fangs for the Fantasy, our weekly podcast where we delve into urban fantasy in all of its many forms, all through our social justice lens. As ever, you have me, Paul, and Renee. Hello, Renee.
Hi, Paul.
And we've got so much to delve through as ever, so shall we hit the ground running with not Team Wolf, because True Wolf, because there was absolutely nothing really to say beyond I don't care about any of it. And instead, let's roll with Defiance, or the Starmer Show.
The Starmer Show. We should talk about the cast fan base.
Yeah, there's so much here. I left it last week because I wanted to see where they were going to go with it, and they went nowhere good with it.
Mm-hmm.
It was
What I don't like about it...
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
What I don't like about it is that Mayor Guy, he framed it as looking up to the cast of fans and calling them a superior race.
Mm-hmm.
And wanting to be like them. Because he has a desire to be cast a fan. He's looking aside the fact that he's playing with their culture in gross and obscene ways.
He's made a fetish out of them, and in some ways I connect it as well to the Doctor, who every time someone challenged him on it, he said it's a kink. What got me about both of these explanations is they were both presented as defences.
Exactly.
So that's what annoyed me, because not only did they bring up these two issues, which are major problems with this kind of appropriation, but they actually presented them as good things, or, reasonable excuses. It's perfectly okay to do this if it's a king. It's perfectly okay to do this if you fetishize the culture and put it onto some kind of weirdo pedestal. I mean, is that any different than some white guy decking himself out with Native American feathers and saying, oh, because they're so connected to the world and nature, and they're so much better because of it? Just because you've put them on the pedestal in your weird,
warped way of thinking
doesn't mean that your appropriation then becomes acceptable. And I think that's two of the many things they got wrong with this, is that they presented these as reasonable defences when they really were not.
They're play acting somebody else's culture.
It also annoyed me a lot that the one attempt to call it out from Alak, well, very briefly said, do you know how offensive this is? And Christie just turned around and turned it into a completely other discussion. I know, right, she has valid points about Alak lying, but it completely destroyed the one quasi challenge they had about this whole thing. And I also think it's kind of not on to try and bring up something completely different when you are caught red-handed, as it were, in the middle of something so appalling. Particularly, and also that's another excuse which doesn't work. Christie's doing this to learn what it is to be Castifan, but she didn't even know what the gem was she was given. So it just shows you how little she's actually learning with this play acting. And it's also something we've seen before. How many times do we see privileged people dress up or pretend to be marginalised people in various contexts, and then they justify it with, I'm learning. So learning? Why don't you speak to people? Why don't you pick up a book?
Yeah, exactly. It's not... marginalised identities aren't appropriate for play. That's basically the only time they want to be like us, is when, hey, they can play at it. They sure as hell don't want all the other oppression that comes with being us.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's only when they like to play in the pool when they can get out when the sharks come round.
And they can control the circumstances.
Yeah.
That's what I always say when people, I wish I had hair like yours. Really?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want anything that comes with being a black girl, so move along. Exactly. And I really find these sort of statements to be very offensive. It's not complimentary at all.
It all comes down to not understanding the trade-off. When you get these quasi-compliments about how cool or nifty or interesting another culture or another identity or another marginalisation is, it always comes with only seeing part of the story.
Exactly.
So yeah, I'm not particularly mad on that one. But there's even more. There's so many things wrong with just this one element. Like there's all right, Deirdre is playing her own game, and I've got another thing to come back to on her, but she's talking
Yes.
about how this is what to call it? This is Christie's chance to reinvent herself, to seek empowerment, to be the other, to define herself rather than define by others. These are wonderfully empowering things, and generally okay. But again, it's like the sort of thing you do see in a lot of activist communities about identities they don't share. It's all right to self-define, but you don't get to self-define as a marginalized identity you don't actually share. I've seen a number of people do this empowered self-defining to basically define themselves out of whatever privilege they have. A number of people who decide that, no, I don't define myself as cis, or I don't define myself as straight, or I don't define myself, because it doesn't matter if you don't define yourself as it, you are.
Well, see, that's the other problem too. She's supposedly wanting to, redefine herself and make her strong, but she's not picking an identity for herself. The name she chose to be identified as is Stama.
Mm-hmm.
That's who she's playing as Stama.
She's hero worshipping Starmer and doing it in a really creepy way.
Is it really hero worship though?
I think I don't know if she either deeply admires Starmer or just think that Starmer is the ideal that Alec wants her to achieve. In both cases, we've got creepy. Go.
The fact that I'm thinking this through, but the fact that she's play acting as Stama tells me it's not so much I want a new identity, as much as, okay, well, she's not really redefining herself by playing to be Stama. If so, she would have created a brand new identity separate from the one that she knows.
Mm-hmm.
I think that at the end of the day, Christie feels irrelevant. She doesn't know where she fits. She hasn't created a role for herself, period. And she's acting like a little girl. She's not acting like the grown married woman she's supposedly is.
Mm-hmm.
By doing it this way.
I think in some ways that comes down to the writing, which has failed to define Christie as anything other than a daughter and a wife.
Mm-hmm.
Because, let's face it, Christie's character has no other compelling or indeed boring features about her. She has no other storyline. She is Rafe's daughter. She is Alak's love interest. And that's kind of what she is and what she does. That's everything about her. That is a sum total of her character.
Yeah. Which is a problem.
It's an extreme problem. I also question the whole empowerment. I mean, the empowerment message which Deirdre gave was very good in some ways, but also you look at her own story and you wonder how far she's done it. She's in, I don't let other people define me, I have reinvented myself. But she reinvented herself from a cheap sex worker to a high-class sex worker, and even though she's now got a career of her own, her dream is the pretty woman dream. That is her happily ever after. It's Pretty Woman. She's not stepped outside of her original definition all that much. And in some ways that could be a very deep statement as, yes, you can empower yourself and change your circumstances, but to a degree you are still kind of trapped by your circumstances. And you need help, or you can't just, put that aside and pretend it doesn't happen. But I don't know if Defiance is going to go that deep with that.
I don't think that they are.
It kind of got me that she's saying, well, I'm going to define myself however I want to. I say, well, you kind of haven't, though. And you've tweaked the level of the role that was handed to you, but you're still kind of still following the role that was handed to you.
I think it's a problem of youth, too.
Mm-hmm.
Because you notice this is happening both to very young women. I almost feel like the writer doesn't quite know what to do with them.
Yeah, and we're getting some very bad tropes of both of them. Again, they're both kind of defined by the men in their lives. Christie has already said Deirdre is now aimed as the other woman aimed at Alak. And everything she's said or done now is very clearly in that context.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Oh
also
yeah,
means one of the few female friendships on the show is turning into a...
well, there have been no real female friendships if you think about it, because the one Stama had with um
Kenya.
Kenya, she ended up murdering Kenya.
Yep, which also kind of destroyed the loving relationship they had there. We have Starmer and Amanda, but how long can that last given the whole Kenya murder?
Yes, there is that.
And who else is there? Yule isn't friendly with anyone because Yule is awesome, and honestly, I almost gave this episode an extra 2 fangs just for Yule's one-liners.
Yeah, but it almost feels when you look at that as though Yule is smart.
Well, yeah,
For not
because
getting into bed with anybody.
I would say
Honestly.
why would she? Who are these people? Who among these people around Yule? I mean, let's face it, though she's not friends with anyone, there's a lot of people who depend on her and would come through to her if necessary. Daytak owes her. Nolan relies on her. Arissa goes to her first. I mean, most people on the cast would turn to Yule and would not say no to Yule. But at the same time, as she said to Daytak, you're a professional criminal, I have every faith in you. She doesn't feel obliged to get too deeply into their dramas.
Exactly.
She plays the game well.
Very much so.
Yeah, she's connected, but she isn't bound.
Question becomes when you look at something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where does like what are they? I don't want Yule, as much as I love her and I love her little quips, I also don't want her to be reduced to someone who's there to provide comic relief and simple one-liners.
She needs her own storylines as well. I think we've got a hint of this with whatever she was plotting with Niles, but it's still very much in the dark. And if it's very much in the dark, we're reaching the point in the season, because we're 7 episodes out of 12, where I kind of look at it and go, yeah, we need to start seeing things now.
Yes. Something has to happen.
Yeah.
I feel like something significant has to happen soon.
And we're missing... And you're looking at things like this, he's saying, well, if Yule has a storyline to come, she doesn't really have time to have one now. Between Irissa hallucinating all the time, the whole Daytak Starmer thing, and Amanda, Niles, Mikado, there isn't really room to start a brand new storyline in the few episodes that are left.
No, there isn't. And this will be season, was it 2? In Eula's comic relief.
Yeah.
And I think, I guess my problem, with the exception of maybe Stama and Amanda, I think when it comes to women, the show has a little bit of a problem.
We've got a lot of good women, but at the same, because we did write that wonderful post about women on Defiance the other day. The thing is, we've got a lot of women, and while we have some awesome ones, we have a lot who are mainly faces in the crowd.
Yes.
But I think one of the surprising things is the number of women on this show. I think that just shows you how used we are to shows where you have 1 or 2 prominent women.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there are problems. They're not connected. They don't like each other. Yule doesn't have their main storyline. Star and Amanda are awesome, but the others...
Yeah, but with Amanda's drug addiction now, are you still calling her awesome?
I am. I don't think it's necessary that a drug addiction would automatically remove the awesomeness from a character, because it works through it. I don't like how quickly she got over it and how easily it was dealt with. But the drug addiction, because of how casually it was handled, was literally a 2-episode thing of any real import. Other than that, it was a blip on her character. Now, I don't like that in terms of how it portrays addiction, but in terms of actually reducing Amanda's power and strength and cunning, I don't think that overly destroys her. What I think does damage her more is the fact that she seems to be playing Team Niles against Mikado rather than playing for Team Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
When that's one thing which I'm not really following very happily at all. 'Cause Mikado obviously gave her the offer to take over mayor of town. Now, I can understand her not wanting to do this because she doesn't want to be a puppet of the Earth Republic. But the reason she gave is, I wouldn't do that to Niles. So I was like, I'm sorry, you were Niles. What now?
Yeah.
So I'm wary of that. I think she's a strong character and a good character, but she's making some dubious decisions. Yule had some great storylines last season, which revealed a lot of complexity about her, but this season has been more thin on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But Starmer.
Yes, Stama.
In theory, I suppose Irissa could become a strong character. I just don't like a storyline. And she seems to be a victim of it more than actually a proactive member of it.
I just feel like there is something. I can't necessarily put my. I just feel like there is something that is so lacking with it.
I don't know if is that the characters or the fact that other than Starmer's storyline, is there anything else which is compelling on this show?
No, and I think they're trying to make Arissa's storyline compelling, but I just don't give a shit.
No,
And
it's
maybe
not.
it's because I'm not fond of religion to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Well, now it's picking up a whole science fiction-y thing with it, because you've got this whole. It definitely seems to be possessed by a computer more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, at least it's turning into some kind of not woo-woo per se, but sci-fi.
It's not working for me. It never worked for me though.
It doesn't work for me because you just got someone who's literally hallucinating, hasn't a clue what's happening, but is still driven to do random stuff because of it. There's no plot line there. We don't know why she's doing it. We don't know what. It's a mystery which has been begging the question for too long without giving the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And we're more concerned about Irissa's angst over the whole thing than actually getting to the bottom of this. I know there's been no attempt to find out the truth here from Irissa.
No, she's just sort of going along with it under the threat of, oh, we'll kill the lawkeeper, kill Nolan.
And that's
I just want that storyline to end.
I do. More time for Starmer.
It needs to go away. And this week, I was also relieved to see that Tommy wasn't in it.
Yeah,
right?
throwing away all of his life for the sake of Irissa. Sorry, go on.
Go ahead.
No, so go. You go.
I'm not fond of that.
No.
So to me, I feel like they really need to go.
Yeah, I mean, they need to really to make this storyline compelling, which is going to be a hard ask at the moment. They need to transform it, and the same goes for Tommy and Irissa. To make this relationship and Tommy's entire character even vaguely palatable after all of this. And I was actually okay with him and Berlin setting their own path, doing their own thing, saying, you know what, there's nothing wrong with the E-Rep. E-Rep's done better for us than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think that was a bad thing, but then that's quickly been torpedoed, and that's because Tommy's decided he owes this massive amount of life-destroying nonsense to Irissa.
It's got to go. And also, the thing with Tommy is that the thing with Tommy is that he ends up being in the role of uppity black man.
Yeah.
That's constantly, and standing there and giving evil eye. First of all, the actor who plays Tommy needs help.
Mm-hmm. He's not brilliant. He's just there constantly to be put in his place by Nolan. That's what he does. Or Amanda sometimes as well. Every time he tries to step forward and say, you know what, I've been lawkeeper in this town for longer than anyone. I have known this town for longer than anyone else in the lawkeep or the military here. No one's acknowledging this. They're not even treating him as a deputy, let alone was he humiliated out of becoming sheriff. But he's not even treated as a second in command. And there's other things as well, like he was he has been humiliated and put in his place very noticeably by Nolan over the fact that he reported Rafe and Nolan for what, hiding a murderer.
Mm-hmm.
And what, are we supposed to be Team Nolan on this? Are we actually supposed to back Nolan on this?
It's not working for me at all. Because Tommy is the betrayer for actually. Tommy is the betrayer for doing essentially what was right.
Yeah. For actually upholding the law and not automatically assuming that the Earth Republic coming in is the evil of evils. And let's face it, he's got no reason to believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no particular reason to assume, except for what we know, which is obviously outside of knowledge, that the Earth Republic is not actually a good thing for Defiance.
No, none whatsoever. None whatsoever.
But instead, by giving us that backstory, they instantly cast Tommy as more unreasonable. Because we know that the Earth Republic is more evil than them all, Tommy, despite objectively his actions being very reasonable, and even in the right, he's going to be cast as a bad guy. And we're expected to see him as a bad guy because of the outsider knowledge.
Yeah.
It's a bad use of a bad character.
Well, he's nothing but a trope anyway, but they're not interested in writing any good. Here's the thing that bothers me. They're doing they're doing okay. They're doing these roles for the cast for the Castifans, and I forget what Aritha is, right?
Iranians.
Arathians, and they're all essentially race-based storylines, right?
Yeah.
You had the plague that the Rathians couldn't catch, but they could carry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you have the white face with the Castifans.
Yeah.
Okay, so here you have two actual people of color in Rafe and in Tommy. But if you notice, they're the only ones that never are affected by race.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, their race disappears, and the roles that could have been given to them are being given to these supernatural bodies.
They would rather use an allegory than actual people. And we see this a
Exactly.
lot. And this is one thing which annoys me a lot about speculative fiction, and people who say speculative fiction is so progressive. It isn't. Speculative fiction uses woo-woo and the alien and the elf and the vampire constantly to steal the issues and appropriate the issues of marginalized people, but very rarely actually gives any of those issues to marginalized people, or not only that, but any reasonable screen time to the few marginalized people they have actually on their shows. And that is a major problem. We do not see this anymore. We do not see in any of our shows, well, there's very rare to see a meaningful role played by any minority, but almost all of them are willing to play in the minority sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a major issue. And I think it's also a problem because it does let fans of the genre pretend that it's progressive because they can address these issues without actually having to get their hands dirty with the actuality.
Yeah. I see it this way because I'm watching this and I think they could. One of the things that bothered me about the mines, the mines and Rafe,
Yeah.
is that they're like, oh, we're going to deed the mines back to these alien creatures because they were there first.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been able to figure out the timeline on that because isn't when I look at it, Rafe's claim looks stronger because these people are coming from outer space, and Rafe is an indigenous man. How
Mm-hmm.
is the claim of an alien stronger than an indigenous man? And
Sorry.
it's particularly a problem when it comes to land.
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that was one of the, I mean, when you think about it, you have colonizers coming in and taking the land from indigenous people. And now you have this fake scenario where an indigenous man is saying that these other people have rights to land. Where's the continuity there? They never explained it. And it bothers me. The more I watch it and I'm looking at these incidences that are happening to the, so now the Raffians have a land claim, knocking out the land claim of the indigenous man, the issue
Mm-hmm.
with disease, the issue with whiteface, and you add it up. We now have quite a few instances in Defiance that involve race but don't involve
People of
racialized
color.
people, and
Yeah.
they've only stolen our things. And I think the issue with rape and the land bothers me the most.
Because they've distinctly presented him as the problem.
Exactly. When we know in real life the issue is settlers came in and stole indigenous land.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work to have him say, well, the aliens were here first.
It's
And
it's sorry, go on.
it's just, to me, it reads like another line of justification as to why indigenous people aren't entitled to the land that is theirs
I
and
think
just
it's
wrapped it up in space gobbledygook.
I think it's something we see a
Right?
lot. I mean, we saw something like this in Lost Scale as well. It's the idea you're going to appropriate these marginalized issues, and then we're going to have the bad guys in it be the current victims,
Mm-hmm.
to try and make some kind of weird point about it. I mean, one of the people who Starmer paid to accost Datac and call him Haint was a black
Mm-hmm.
man. And so they do, and we see it with the family who was looking down on Hale having a relationship with Kenzie were obviously black people. And this is a thing, this idea of we're going to use marginalized people to perpetuate the very marginalization they actually suffer. And it's the case of, well, is there someone, I'm sure there's some writer out there who's saying, oh, isn't it wonderfully meta and ironic and powerful in some very artistic manner? And instead it just makes the appropriation all the grosser.
Mm-hmm.
It's a major problem. I think Defiance is particularly bad at it, but it is a problem in the genre as well.
It just, week after week, because you know what happens? You see these instances happening sort of individually,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they don't seem very much when you see them happening individually, right? It's only when you add them all together that you can see that there's a problem. But it takes
Yeah.
doing that to be able to see that there's a problem because they're so spaced out, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the reasons why it's so useful to do what we do and why we do our discussion posts.
Mm-hmm.
It is important to look not just at one episode of a season or even one season of a show. It's important to look at it as an overall arc and also to look at the genre as an overall arc. And there's lots of things that individually don't mean much, like for example the women who die in Supernatural and then inspire the men to greater man-painting heroics. Once or twice you kind of miss it, but when you realize that every single male character on that show has had a woman die for the sake of his empowered man pain, you realize, oh dear, that's actually a thing. And this is the kind of thing you look. And like when you see like black people being eaten on Vampire Diaries, you need to look over several seasons to see, oh look, all these serving black witches, all these black people as snack food. This is a thing on this show.
Yes.
And I think that's why it's quite important for us to to look at a series of books and shows. This is why I always get people who try to not just take each book individually or just take each show individually. I say, no, while we do need to look at each episode individually as well, it's also important to see the arcs they're creating here.
I love the man pain line. I love it.
Well, it's just such a thing about Supernatural. Every character must have man pain, and they get it by a woman being dead. He even brought in Kevin to play their seer for a couple of seasons. What happened? His girlfriend had his mother.
Oh wow.
Alright, his mother came back later, but for a long time she seemed to be dead for his man pain.
Isn't that nice?
Bobby, they not only gave her a dead wife, but they resurrected one of the women they'd previously killed to inspire Dean and Sam, so that she could then die again to inspire Bobby as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow, it keeps getting better.
They're really good at that. But this is the thing, you look at the arcs, and you look at the arcs in Defiance with all of these instances of appropriation, say, once or twice you may miss it, but you look at the arc, and the longer a show runs, the more obvious this becomes. And I mentioned Supernatural because it's into its 10th season, and it's still repeating its shit.
Exactly. You can't. I mean, for me, it was a case of I'm looking at it and watching it go over time, And separately, like I said, not so bad. But when you start looking beyond separately, that's when things begin to change.
Yeah.
And drastically.
So this is why it is so important, because the thing is as well, you absorb them together, but you absorb them in parts, and it has a cumulative effect. It was like when you watch Being Human US. Being Human US seems pretty good. 3 characters, one of the main characters is a woman of colour. That's ideal, that's great. We've got an actual diversion and an ensemble cast. But it's only after 4 seasons you realise how little involved the 2 guys have been in Sally's storyline.
Yeah, they're just not there for that.
And this is the kind of thing you miss if you look at it in episode by episode. So we'll have to see. I'll have to see if Defiance is continuing this trend, but I really think they are, because they're on this trade now. They're not going to stop.
No, they're never going to stop. They're never going to stop. We've done Defiance to death this week, so we should
move on. We'll have to leave Starmer and her awesomeness and Jelena for another time, because I think it's pretty much obvious what was happening there. Dominion and our angels who are evil.
Yes. Very, First of all, I'm going to be shocked if Dominion gets a 2nd season. I'm going to say that right off the hop. Okay, you're more hopeful? Go ahead.
I'm not hopeful, I'm just kind of just sad and disappointed, because this show had so much potential, and it just... bad acting, bad storylines, and over abuse of man pain has just kind of ruined what potential it had. And that's just kind of sad. And I still don't get the whole idea of Gabriel cultists.
When you figure it out, let me know.
Oh, he's come down from the heavens to decide to destroy us all. Let's worship him. I'm still kind of torn as to why there is even religion in this world, given the givens.
Well, because, they have to understand at this point that God took off, right?
That's it. You say, what happened to God? There's Michael crossing the road. Ask him. You say, we need to take it on faith. There's an archangel living next door. You do not need to take anything on faith. You have an archangel to ask. Not just an archangel, the archangel. What do you want? Jesus to come to tea with scones and tea? Say, yeah, totally holiday.
Well, that's just it. He's gone. He's gone. So what are these people praying to?
Exactly.
And the Chosen One theme, again, is tired and old.
Oh, isn't it just?
And if they're seeking a Chosen One again, why aren't they thinking, hey, shouldn't it be Jesus?
Well, this is the whole...
Or I don't understand the context within which this show happens.
It doesn't make sense to me, because none of the prayer makes sense, because if they're praying to and let's face it, a very blatantly Christian deity. At a push, you can say, well, these angels actually exist in Abrahamic religions in general, so it could be Christian, Judaism, or Islam. But again, why is that even in doubt? There's Archangel Michael right there. Hey, which tradition's right? Clearly none of them, because all of them mention the archangels being murdering psychopaths.
Actually, I disagree with you there.
Mm.
That's not the way to look at. See, the problem is we've romanticized angels, right?
Yeah.
As a culture, we've turned them into romantic figures. But if you actually look at the Bible, right? Anytime an angel shows up, it's never good news for the person the angel is appearing to. Their life is pretty much fucked from here on in.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, excuse the French there.
It's
But
it's
that's
true.
generally the case. And that is the one thing I have to say that I think Dominion got right in that sense. Why would you want to see an angel? They are God, supposedly God's chosen warriors, and he calls them out specifically when it's time to spill blood.
Mm-hmm.
That's when angels appear, right? So seeing Gabriel as bloodthirsty as he is makes sense to me.
Well, Gabriel was supposed to be one of the Archangel of Mercy. I'm actually kind of surprised that Gabriel's the one they picked out to be the evil one, because it actually fit Michael more, because he's a warrior. He's actually the self-righteous, I'm making the rules, pure one. Gabriel was always, the one who brought compassion. Or Uriel would work as a slaughterer of everything.
Yeah. Well, the idea being that Michael was,
Mm-hmm.
right? This was, and Michael has changed because Michael is the one who, it really wasn't a flood, right? It was just Michael running around slaughtering everybody. But even that revision doesn't make sense to me either.
By
This,
definition, at the time, surely the angels were quite literally just following orders, since at the time God was actually about and active.
yes, he was there. Okay, this is the problem. The problem is that the way they changed the story doesn't work. Again, it's another case of this does not work. For the simple reason that he said, oh, well, mankind couldn't handle it, so mankind turned it into a flood and didn't want it to be about God, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how could that be the case? Because didn't God slaughter every firstborn child of the Egyptians?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Turn the sea to blood, let loose locusts and frogs and all kinds of shit. So the idea that mankind couldn't handle a harsh God and that's why that story got changed makes no sense to me.
It doesn't. And this is the thing, it isn't making a lot of internal consistency there. The idea we can't handle a harsh God, so we have a metaphor. Well, unlike the other parts in the Bible where he quite clearly is willing to slaughter en masse. So, mm-hmm. And then the
He's
idea
not
that
fluffy.
Yeah, and then this idea that was supposed to be, oh my God, Gabriel was so and Michael was so evil, but at least he changed. I don't understand. If we're following, and the whole point of the moment of what the decisions they make now is how confused the archangels are without God, hence the epic daddy issues they all have. But then again, everyone on the show has epic daddy issues. Claire, William, um, Alex, or Alex has a motherload of daddy issues.
Well, including Gabriel himself,
Yeah.
right? This is really that part of it. I find it interesting that it's um, all been about that.
It is, but the thing which brings me is this idea that Gabriel was so and Michael was so terrible in the beginning. While God was active, surely by definition you can't actually imply any kind of individual agency on the parts of the angels.
Hmm.
Particularly since rather dramatically in the canon, as it were, angels who were acted on their own free will tended to not do so well.
Yeah.
So
I'm not getting it as much.
I This is the thing. I love the setting. I love the concept, but I don't think they've fallen it through very well. So I don't like the Gabriel cultist storylines. I could do without the Chosen One narrative, and some of the actions of the angels themselves don't seem to make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
I'd expect to actually see a lot more confusion and culture shock. You know, this is a species of creatures that have lived almost constantly under permanent supervision, as it were.
Yes.
And this is actually for one of the many, many things that Supernatural gets wrong. It's one thing they got right. Non-archangels, any angel below an archangel, is really lost and confused because they're quite literally incapable of existing without instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole idea of not having instruction leaves them kind of lost, and that's one of the more interesting elements of the series. I think they kind of missed the chance to go with that on this.
Hmm.
So it's the whole thing. It kind of sums up Dominion for me. This whole show had immense potential, but it's never really tried to go there.
Well, the other thing other than the daddy issues too, is how
Mm-hmm.
you deal with these daddy issues. You know, even though David is a vengeful bastard, David is a horrible, horrible parent. There can be no doubt that he was a horrible parent.
Yeah.
What William has done amounts to elder abuse.
Mm-hmm.
He's literally broken his father's mind.
Yeah. It's a very classic brainwashing technique.
But the thing that bothers me about it is it's evil. It's David's comeuppance because he's evil,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so he's created a monster. And it's not framed as, hey, you shouldn't be doing this to anybody no matter what.
Yeah, and there's no the fact. I think the fact that he is worshipping Gabriel. There is the fact, yeah, of course, he's worshipping Gabriel, so he is kind of. We can't say what William is doing is a good thing, but at the same time, you're right in that in some ways, because of his parenthood, David is considered almost indirectly responsible for what William is doing to him.
And then here's the other thing that gets me about it all. It's juxtaposed now to Claire and Edward.
Mm-hmm.
Claire's method is far less violent, right?
Yeah.
But it also basically sends the idea that the younger generation has the right to put the older generation out to pasture whenever they feel like it.
Exactly.
Right?
Claire.
He made a decision that she did not agree with. And based on that very simple thing, she's able to say to him, you don't deserve what you have any longer.
And particularly since there's been an ongoing conflict between the two, which she's apparently been willing to put up with.
Right? I mean, if she's going to be angry, she should be angry about the fact that she's being forced into marrying a man that she loves for absolutely stupid reasons as far as I can see. Right?
Oh, yeah.
But
No reason at all.
exactly. But the idea that young people can just unilaterally decide, hey, I'm going to put this old person out to pasture, to me is a very scary thing.
I think one. Sorry, go on.
Only because issues of ageism
Mm-hmm.
tend to really get ignored in our society.
I think I'd have been happy with it if she was over her marriage, because then that would have been an act of self-defense. I'd also have been happy with it if she was doing this because after so many years of rule and creating this dreadful V system and the injustices their society contains, she'd decide, you know what, she's not putting up with this anymore. I can understand that as well, because working against an oppressive force, fair enough. But it wasn't. It was a very personal motive. It was very much a case of, I no longer deem you fit personally, so I'm kicking you out. And very much in the same way, it had echoes of the whole Ryson's not fit to rule because he has a heart murmur.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there was two perfectly good motives why a person should have tried to have removed him without drawing on that ageism. But the one she chose was much more, I have the right to do this for my own reasons.
Right. And I mean, essentially, that's what it comes down to with David. Whether or not David was abusive to William, right?
Hmm.
It still comes down to the fact that he's old and I'm young and new and I have new ideas and I can bend him to my will because I want to.
Yeah. And then with a lot of daddy issues thrown on top to make it almost an act of self-harm.
Exactly, to make it sort of justifiable. But that's the way I think you have to look at it. To look at this as an issue of ageism and elder abuse, because Dominion is absolutely determined to juxtapose David and Claire.
Yeah.
And framing her as the good one because, hey, at least she didn't mentally break her father when she put him out to pasture.
We've still got this, all the, you know what, still conspiring to remove them is still okay.
Exactly. And the more I think about it, the more I find it very problematic. Because that's exactly what happens. The moment you're deemed no longer useful to society, you're pushed aside. And
Hmm.
it's seen as a good thing, go make way for the young people because they're entitled. Forgetting that one day you're going to be the one who's pushed aside. And I just think it's interesting that they're telling this story while in the real world we have a greatly aging population.
Yeah,
You know,
it
am I
is. It's
making
an
too
issue.
much of this? Am I
I
making too much?
think, I don't know. I mean, the part of the problem is as well that I think there's an issue there, but I think it's muddied by the fact that both of them are objectively awful people who need removing as well. So there is a muddying of the waters there. And also the fact that, William is obviously evil and acting for very evil motives of indoctrination. But there is definitely an undercurrent there. I think it's a case of there's a point, but I'd like to see where it goes from here.
See, I don't even see them as ultimately evil the way that you see them as ultimately evil. Because whether we like to admit it or not, the way David and Edward rule is the way we too are ruled. We don't know everything, and it's always framed as for our own good, you know? Um, and do we necessarily call the people who rule us evil?
I do. Quite regularly.
Do you?
Oh, God, yeah. I'm like David Cameron is my prime minister. Of course I do. It's kind of like my nightly mantra.
Well, I kind of call mine the evil little pit bull in a sweater vest. Well, no, I
Uh,
don't even use the word evil. It's just the nasty little man in the sweater vest.
we're
Because that's how I see him.
we're going to have to shift on because we spent a lot of time on Defiance and Dominion.
We should probably do the book of the week, actually.
Yeah. Just a quick note on Under the Dome and Falling Skies. No! It makes no sense, and they're both going to ridiculous levels to make their plot lines work. And Julia, oh, no, I'm going to have to talk about this week because I can't do it briefly. So next week we're going to have to talk about Under the Dome and Falling Skies. Because,
Sorry, we
really?
got we got sort of carried away. It's all Paul's fault. You can blame him, not me.
Those shows, and we probably need to touch on Witches of East End next week as well. So I'm making a note now so we can make sure we mention them next time. Um, right. The book of the week was The Vampire Armand by Anne Rice, and it was dreadful.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, first of
Okay,
all,
What was wrong with Anne Rice this time?
let's start a list. First of all, this whole concept of this book I find pointless. On several levels. The Vampire Chronicles are already a series with a ridiculously long backstory and
Yeah.
very little actual plot. There's almost no plot, but we've got vast amounts of history for every damn character for no apparent reason. So the last thing this series needed was another story book which is entirely based on a character's backstory. That's the first problem. The very concept of another book about any character's backstory is pointless.
But it's the Vampire Chronicles, so that's what you're going to get. That's the whole idea. You're going to get nothing but backstory from these ancient vampires.
The next point is Armand is not even a major character in this story. He is irrelevant. He is a brief pit stop in Louis and Lestat's stories when they happen to be passing through Paris, and then that's kind of it. He's not
Yeah.
a very relevant or compelling character. And it's envisioned by the fact you read this book, and the only things relevant that happen in his life are those two moments. He's had 500 years of pretty pointless passive existence, which we were told about in depth.
Uh-huh.
And this is the thing. There's not only we're going to drag up the backstory of every vampire, we're going to drag up the backstory of a vampire who's not even really relevant to anything. He has done nothing. He is not relevant to the other character stories. The only interesting times in his life have already been told. We already know about his backstory with Marius, but we decided to then just go into exactly the story we already knew in extremely painful depth. We already knew about his backstory with Santino, but we had nothing new was added. They didn't tell us anything we didn't already know. And in among all this pointless, over-described purple prose to describe everything, we had Anne Rice revisit her theological debate about aesthetics and morality and what have you. And I'm saying revisit because she's not having another debate about aesthetics and theology and morality. She's having the same debate she's had since Louis. Every single vampire has exactly the same moral conflict, thinks exactly the same things, drags in God, drags in aesthetics, and has long diatribes saying exactly the same points in every single book.
Really?
Yes! And this is 5 times we have revisited exactly the same philosophical musings, just repeated in slightly different words. And on top of all that, Armand looked at Louis and said, excuse me, I can outwine you. And really tried.
Well, okay. You have to understand that this book probably came into being because a lot of people find Armand to be a very compelling character.
Why?
Well, because he's dark and brooding, right?
That's not compelling. That's Louis. Mark 2. The paedophilic.
Really? Armand, okay, why do you say that about Armand? Because of the little boy he changed?
Oh, don't even get me started on this because that's going to be another rant as well. But first of all, I need to add, this is a quote from the book. How can I tell you something that doesn't interest me? Is it supposed to interest you? The problem is that too much has been written about my past already. Anne Rice knows. Anne Rice knew when she wrote this book. And she is lampshading it.
Really?
She openly said, this book is boring, you already know what everything that's in it. She said it in the text.
Alright. That's just... But that is...
accurate.
I don't know that I would say that, though.
Why? What was different? What was necessary? What was new about Armand's story? About the only thing that was new, which we didn't already know, was he's actually Russian. But, you know, he's kind of forgotten most of his Russianness, so...
Yeah.
And that's kind of it. That is the only thing we learnt new in the Vampire Armand, that he was at one point Andre.
Mm-hmm. And had a religious background.
We knew he spent some time in the monastery, but, you know, every single character has shoveled great big heaps of religious theology into their every single debate. I'm actually somewhat looking forward to Pandora, simply because as a non-Christian, Pandora should hopefully escape Anne Rice's endless navel-gazing. So can we not have an entire novel series based on her crisis of faith?
Well, that's just what pretty much they are, though. I don't know why you're expecting that it would be different.
It would be interesting if each book brought a new facet or a new way of thinking or new development or new. I mean, I'm saying new, this new, that new. Anything new would be good. But repeating your same doubts and questions over and over and over in a nice little circular motion is not very fun. And then there is the paedophilic thing.
Oh, here we go. Which are you complaining about? You're complaining about? Are you complaining about Marius
I'm
and?
complaining on many levels. Right, first of all, Armand is 17 when he was 10, and he was with Maris in an intimate sexual relationship for 2 years before that already. Um, and I will say this, it's the first time Anne Rice has finally shown that bisexuals do actually have sex with other men, rather than just, entertain the concept of the possibility.
Yeah.
The thing is as well, not only is Armand, was he, obviously being sexually used before 17 by someone who virtually owned him, but it's constantly emphasized how Armand is very young looking even for 17. It's said repeatedly how small he is, how young he is, how childlike he is, how he can't grow a beard. And you have lines like this: "Good night, my young love, my child love, my son." And the number of times people call Armand in this book a child is disturbing. The Bianca, who's a woman they both sleep with, talks about sleeping with a man and a boy. When they talk about random Italians who aren't bisexual or gay honest, they just occasionally like to have sex with boys. Again, they have sex with women and boys. And this is the same thing that happened in Men Not the Devil. You had a bisexual man who was interested in women and boys. And in Witching Hour as well, of course, with the bisexual who was preying on small children. And there's Lestat, who thinks it's quite that who said that, if you were spending so much time learning from this old man and he was wanting to molest you, you should have let him. Over and over again, child, boy. If a man has sex with another man, he has sex with a boy, a child. Over and over. This is not just in this book, it's in every single book. There's this really disturbing idea that bisexual men have sex with women and children. And I'm disturbed by the fact that the two new additions, two companions to Armand's stable, is a 25-year-old woman and a 12-year-old boy.
Boy, yeah.
This is not just an isolated incident anymore. This is a really heavy, common habit. Over and over, boy, 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 children, children, children. It's disturbing that the pattern is this well established and this strong. It's not just the Vampire Armand, it is Men Not the Devil, it is the Vampire Lestat, it is the Body Thief, it is Witching Hour.
Okay. All right. I can't really argue with you on that, except to say that I think she looks at it from a vampire aesthetic. I think that's the way she was probably thinking about it, as in, the younger your turn, the better, right?
I think to a degree we're still talking about sexualization, and again, this doesn't. And another thing to bring that to here is that boy, 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 child, child, child. But then you turn around and say women and boys, women and children, adult
Yeah.
women, and like Lestat pursues a woman who is in her 40s.
Yes.
Bianca is clearly a mature woman, and that the current companion is a 25-year-old woman. The idea that a woman has to be childlike to be beautiful. We have Claudia, but we have counterexamples as well.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an idea of the younger it is, it's better to be turned. But at the same time, again, we have people who are quite appalled that they turned Claudia at such a young age. So I'm not quite sure I can follow the whole idea that, well, vampire aesthetics, vampire values, and plus this is not just shared by the vampires. In the Witching Hour, it's a human mortal witch.
Yeah.
In Tales of the Body Thief, it's the ghost who has died. In the Vampire Armand, we're also talking about standard people in Italy. These gang members who they ended up killing. It's not just opinions that are ascribed to Armand or Marius or Lestat or Louis. This is an opinion that's
That's
held
the
by
thing. Yes.
any bisexual character in the show. In the book series. I know, is it one book? I'd be disturbed and I'd mention it and then let it go. Two books, disturbed, mention it, not be too happy but let it go. Three books, and there's something happening here now and
You're
I'm
gonna
not
call it a
really happy with
pattern,
it. And
right?
then when we get to 4 or 5 books, that's like, yeah, okay, no, this is a thing. This is actually a thing that is actually happening.
All right, but you're not exactly neutral when it comes to Anne Rice. You would admit to that,
I
right?
don't like Anne Rice, but I mean, these tropes kind of leap out to me, particularly since they are an established trope. The idea of the gay or bisexual man who is a child predator or doesn't have any cares about age of consent or and preys on the young. And this is something which is really heavily reinforced in our society.
So
And
you,
I am very aware of it when I see it, but I think that it's not even subtle in these books because the references are coming up repeatedly over and over. It's not like taking one incident and putting the most negative slant possible on it.
uh-huh.
It's we do have quite a mountain of issue here.
Mm-hmm. Well, but
So
again,
mm,
you're not neutral, are you?
I'm not a fan of Anne Rice, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm twisting this idea of paedophilic intent when it's here. This gay or bisexual man as sex predator is a really common trope, and it's really common
I agree
throughout
that it's
this
a
book.
common trope. I agree that it's a. I agree that it's a common trope. I mean, we saw it just this. The bisexual as person as predator. We saw it just this weekend, Witches of East End.
Yeah. And I think Anne Rice has been kind of layering it in all of these books. And even though I'm not a fan of her work, I'm not a fan of many people's works, but I don't need to look for a trope that's offensive to gay and bi men. Certainly not one that's put out this way. If I don't like Anne Rice, I don't need to read too much into the Vampire Armand's um, love of these small children and boys and children and sexualizing of children. I have more than enough ammunition in the redundant, overwritten prose, the
Oh
terrible lack of
dear.
anything remembering a story, and the
Okay.
sheer repetitiveness of it. I don't
Oh dear.
need to slant any further than that. It's a terrible, badly written book, even without the child predation. But
Okay. First, let me apologize because that was
mhm,
kind of improper of me to suggest that your bias against Anne Rice would cause you to do such. Um,
okay,
so I apologize for that. But I do want to say that I knew going into this book, Armand, that you would absolutely hate it
yeah.
because it was, I think, the single most boring book of the entire series, and probably the most unnecessary. You know what I mean? But
Very much so.
I think the Vampire Armand really was a case of fan service.
hmm
Because though you don't like to admit it, right? Armand is a very popular character in the series.
I'm happy to admit it. I'm very happy to admit that fandom has lost its ever-loving mind. Fandom quite regularly loses its ever-loving mind. We all know this. This is what fandom does. I don't think fandom ever found its ever-loving mind. It's not lost its ever-loving mind for so long. I can perfectly agree that it probably is fan service. I'm fully accepting of that because he is a bland and boring character, but it's amazing what people will put on their pedestals.
Right? So, I mean, I'm willing to cut Anne Rice a break based in that. Based in the fact that the book was, very clearly a little piece of fan service. Well, a big piece of fan service because it was far longer than it needed to be, and who gave a shit in the end?
I didn't give a shit in the beginning, let alone the end.
So,
Anne Rice herself didn't give a shit. She said it outright in that text. I say it again. How can I tell you about something that doesn't interest me? Is it supposed to interest you? The problem is that too much has been written about my past already. Anne Rice is openly warning us with that sentence that this book is repetitive and unnecessary.
um, okay. So we know that the story is fan service, and that's why it
Yeah.
exists in the first place. I think part of the problem is Anne Rice has difficulty talking about how people interact with each other.
Yes. I know it's the
And
standard thing I snark about in the View, how it's a case of if the postman visited Armand, Louis, or Lestat, he would declare by the end of the week that they do indeed love him forever.
yes, so that's why I'm willing to say that maybe it's not as bad as we think it is relative to how she writes interactions between people.
I can put that down if it was just a case of, like, I can agree with that when we're, for example, talking about Lestat and Gabrielle. I can even agree with that when we talk about Lestat and Claudia, because the words used are in terms of affection and love. Very oddly worded love. But when we're talking about this, we're talking about men visiting prostitutes or keeping sex slaves. We're talking about a man's physicality. We're
Okay,
not talking. We're talking awfully sexualized language.
but let's also put this into historical context of when this would have been written. What we see as pedophilic and problematic now certainly would not have been seen as problematic then.
Well, when did she write them? The Vampire Armand was written in 1998. I
No, no,
can't.
no, 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 not the year it was written, where it was set up. So I think the issue isn't that it was included. That the issue isn't that it was included. The issue is that we didn't say that it was wrong. Because when the story, the time period for when the story was set, it certainly wasn't considered absurd or pedophilia. That you could say is fair.
Except we still have the witching hour, which holds it not in the distant past but in the 50s, and we have Tale of the Body Thief with one of the modern victims of it. And again, they're not talking boys and girls, they're talking women and boys.
Okay, but again, I'm going to say to you, in the 50s, everybody had the supposed funny uncle, and nobody talked about it. So I mean, like in right now, modern context, you could say openly pedophilia. But
Oh,
you have to think about how the characters would relate in their time period to what is going on. So you're adding a moral, um, I'm not saying that it wasn't wrong then, but I am saying that in the context of the time it was created, the people who were engaging in it wouldn't have seen it as wrong. So I don't think the problem is the inclusion of it. I think the problem is the not saying, "Hey, this is wrong."
there's no challenge, but the thing is, as well, is every bisexual character. I mean, there's a lot of the times when it's not even necessary to be there. They're just going to. I'm going to throw in another bisexual character who likes small boys, even though he likes adult women.
Hmm.
And so it is overwhelming. It is in the modern context as well, because again, in the Tale of the Body Thief, this is an ongoing thing in all time periods with no challenge and with a declared disparity between women and boys. So I think there's too much there for us to kind of reach for any kind of justification there. At very best, it's this child predation without any kind of challenge. At very best, that's what we've got.
Okay,
And
I
at
think you're
worst, it's
missing my point,
ubiquitous.
though.
Hmm.
I do, I really do. It's not that I don't think that Anne Rice has some sort of fetish for the GLBT community, because she absolutely does.
Hmm.
Anybody who's read her Sleeping Beauty series knows that the woman has a sick fetish when it comes to gay and bisexual men.
Hmm.
Right? So I'm gonna put that out there right now. You haven't read that series, and you never want to, because you throw a hissy fit and pitch it across the room.
Hmm.
But that's why I say, for me, the recurring problem is there's never anyone saying, "Hey, maybe this is wrong." And I also think that she's the type of person who thinks that if she fetishizes a group of people, that she's sort of uplifting them, and hey, isn't she sort of
Yeah.
cool? It's one of the things that she has fallen down on repeatedly. I don't want you to think that I believe that Anne Rice is faultless or blameless or any of these things. I do totally see them.
I agree with all of that, but I also think there's still a thing with this bisexual as predator trope because it's too common. I agree with your point on the challenge. I agree with your point on the fetishism, but I think that we can't ignore the trope as well, because it's just so common. We shall see what the future books bring. Because they've got Merrick coming up soon, and then Blood and Gold and Black. Oh God! But we shall see if more boys, and if it's more women and boys, and more boys being preyed upon, and more bisexuals who think ages of consent are just quaint little things when it comes to men.
Mm-hmm.
So we shall see how much further it goes. But at the moment, the preponderance of evidence is not making me hopeful.
Yeah, I don't want you to think that I'm belittling your point at all. I see exactly where you're coming from, right? I guess what I'm saying is that I would have more faith in Anne Rice if that had been included. If I had seen some kind of recognition from her that her fetishism is wrong,
Yeah.
but it's an on. I know, because you brought up the Witching Hour series, right? And my point by bringing up the Beauty series is to tell you that it really is an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
And
And
there's never any form of growth. It's I fetishize them, therefore I include them, and this is good, and I am queen of the rainbow,
yeah.
sort of thing, in a sort of Katy Perry like way, but with
Oh yeah.
vampires. That's
Yeah.
sort of
Kind
how
of
I
like.
see Anne Rice when it comes to the alphabet soup. Katy Perry, but with vampires.
Yeah, I can see it. I think there's more there as well, but yeah, it's a mess, and we will see. We are going to inflict more, but it also comes back to our point we made about Defiance, the usefulness of looking at a whole season, a whole series, rather than picking each one as individuals. You see the patterns emerge,
Mm-hmm.
and those patterns are usually very, very ugly.
Yes.
I noticed something similar with Laura K. Hamilton, which I wrote an entire post about that because, oh my god.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, we've seen the same terrible destructive trope. She's another fetishist who thinks that makes her a queen of a rainbow.
Well, that's kind of the way I see it, right? Um, and I sort of want to. I sort of feel like it's not the inclusion; it's how the inclusion happens. I guess
Mm-hmm.
the short form of what I was trying to say. It's not the inclusion of it; it's how the inclusion happens.
It's
You know,
why it's always a case of just numbers are not sufficient.
yeah. I mean, you can't fault someone for throwing in something that's ugly that already exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the not saying that, hey, this is ugly,
Not
that
challenging
really
the
sticks
prejudice.
in my craw, right? Like having a person of color undergo racism in your story is fine. That's the real world. That is how things are. But then to not have someone say, this moment where anyone stands up to say, you know what, this shouldn't happen, is where to me the bigger fault lies.
I think that is where there is a major fault, but I think there's also an issue in how it's included and how often it's included, where it's included, and how much it was needed to be included. And there's a difference between I'm going to show this terrible bad thing and not challenge it, and I'm going to show this terrible bad thing and do it so often and so gratuitously and so commonly that I don't even think the author thinks this is a terribly bad thing.
Mm, yeah.
So that's where we're getting to stickiness. But we shall, in 2 weeks, we've got another one of her books to read. So
Yes, and you, Paul, will be whining and moping and groaning and carrying on.
I intend to in great, great volume because, yeah,
The good news is that we're almost there. You've done it. You're gonna make it.
I am. I will have them all read in time for her new book coming out in October. I
Yes.
deserve a small prize.
Oh, stop it.
You're right, that's just wrong. I deserve a really large prize.
You know what? Anne Rice is no Laurel K. Hamilton. It's not as unbearable as you make it out to be. I'd prefer to read Anne Rice than Laurel K. Hamilton.
I hate myself for saying this, but no, actually, I'd rather read Laura K. Hamilton. Horrible books, terribly written, but I could get through them easier.
Oh, for heaven. That's because you skip all the humping. That's the only reason why you can get through Laurel K. Hamilton faster than Anne
But to be
Rice.
fair, when I realise that we're having another philosophical maundering about a point that's already been made 4 books, I tend to skim that as well.
You might miss something deep, though.
Hmm. Shall we say no?
Oh, gosh. Okay, you know what? I give up. You're impossible.
Anyway, our book of the week now, because we're running well over time now.
That's your fault again.
I blame you. Our book of the week for next week is Divergent by Veronica Roth, and this is
Excuse me.
officially your fault.
How is this my fault?
Because you're the one who derails the whole Divergent nossiness.
Okay, should I not have covered the movie?
I didn't say that, I just say that I'm blaming you.
Oh, well, gee, thank you for that. All right, so we're going to be reading the Hunger Games ripoff.
Yes. Hunger Games Mark 2,
Yes.
with more love interest.
Mm-hmm. And
Because,
just,
you know, we need more disturb. I probably shouldn't be making this point at the very end of the day, but I have to make it. Dystopians with men involve surviving, grittiness, living, struggling with day-to-day horror. Dystopians with women involve a young woman against the world who ignores everything going terribly wrong so she can make love with someone.
well, yes. There's always that big love interest to deal with, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt because I haven't read the book. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt that a
Yeah.
lot was missed in the movie. You can find my review of the movie on Fangs. It was published this morning, and I'm hoping that it will be better than the movie. You know, with a 2 hour time frame, you're pretty limited as to what you can include.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that what the case will be is that at the end of it all, the movie messed up, and there are all kinds of things in the book that explain many of the things that just didn't make sense in the movie.
Yeah. So we shall hope.
All right then.
With that note, we should probably bring it to a close. We will definitely discuss the shows we didn't discuss this week because we were really hammering it this week. This just shows we have
Yes.
so much to say. See you all next week, the same time, same place. Otherwise, you can catch us on fangsforfantasy.com, on Twitter at fangsforfantasy, on Facebook, Goodreads, Book Likes, Library Thing, and probably many other places which I've completely forgotten, but we just tend to appear all under the name Fangs for Fantasy. So I hope to see you all next week at the same time, same place, and hope to see you in the week in the meantime.
Have a good week and beware of vampires who shine.
Oh yes, sparkly vampires. Do kill them.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.